When the spotlight fades, Hollywood reveals its real face: private mansions, encrypted invites, masks instead of names, secret sex parties, spoken about only by those who survived the inside. These aren't myths. They're accounts from people who were in the room. Parties where power matters more than consent, and silence is enforced. One rule above all else: it never happened. Tonight, we expose the secret gatherings hidden behind fame and money, where rituals are staged, boundaries are crossed, and blackmail is quietly recorded. Welcome to the deep end of the rabbit hole. We've all seen the red carpets, the $10,000 tuxedos, and the perfectly curated Instagram stories of your favorite A-list stars. It looks glamorous, right? But what happens when the flashing lights of the paparazzi finally fade out? What actually goes down in those massive high-walled mansions in the Hollywood Hills when the sun sets and the regular people are sent home? Today, we are peeling back the gold leaf to look at something much darker. We're talking about the secret sex parties of the rich and famous, a world where the masks aren't just for fashion and the never-happened rule is the only law that matters. To understand how deep this goes, we have to start with a movie that most people think is just a weird piece of fiction. I'm talking about Stanley Kubrick's 1999 masterpiece, Eyes Wide Shut. If you haven't seen it, the plot is basically a fever dream. Tom Cruise stumbles into a massive, secret masked orgy hosted by the global elite in a creepy mansion. For decades, people thought Kubrick was just being eccentric. But in the years since his death, the film has transitioned from a psychological thriller into something much more like a documentary. It cemented the secret sex cult aesthetic in the public's mind. But it also did something else. It gave the real Hollywood elite a blueprint to follow. Think about it. Long before any investigative journalist actually stepped foot into a modern masked party, the underworld of Hollywood was already being built on these myths. The film fueled endless speculation that movie stars were holding these exact types of gatherings. And here is where it gets crazy. It wasn't just speculation. Kubrick was a meticulous researcher. According to Roger Avary, the co-writer of Pulp Fiction, who also has an original script of Eyes Wide Shut, the film was centered around an elite pedophile ring, and the final scene was meant to depict Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman's characters sending their child to the ring. During the final scene, you can see them sort of nudge their daughter towards two older men, let her walk away, and take their eyes off of her. The studio changed the original cut, and Stanley Kubrick suddenly died after a few days. Damon Lorner is the founder of Sanctum, arguably the most infamous elite sex club in the world. Lorner has openly admitted that he launched the club specifically because he watched Eyes Wide Shut and wanted to fulfill the fantasies of his wealthy, bored clients. He didn't just see a movie, he saw a business model for the 1%. According to reports from Men's Health, early attendees of these Sanctum parties would literally whisper to each other in the hallways saying, "You have to go, it's so eyes wide shut." It's like the movie became the North Star for elite debauchery. We're talking about parties where the buy-in for a membership can cost upwards of $75,000. For that price, you aren't just getting a drink at a bar, you're getting total anonymity. You're getting a room full of people who are just as famous and just as compromised as you are. But this isn't just about one club in LA. This is a systemic culture of silence. Back in 2013, Fox News ran a massive investigation that claimed invite-only parties where anything goes were a staple of the hidden Hollywood nightlife. We're talking about group sex, S&M, heavy drug use, and high-end escorts, all happening just a few miles away from where the Oscars are held. The most chilling part? The code words. Insiders have revealed that celebrities and their fixers use the acronym NH to refer to these gatherings. NH stands for Never Happened. It's a psychological contract. If you're in the room, you agree that reality doesn't exist outside those four walls. If you see a Marvel actor or a pop princess doing something illegal or out of character, you treat it like a ghost story. It never happened. This legacy of Kubrick's film created a weird feedback loop. The movies depicted the elite as masked, ritualistic, and untouchable. So the elite began to act masked, ritualistic, and untouchable. It created a sense of protected space where the normal rules of society and even the laws of the land simply didn't apply. It's the ultimate us versus them mentality. When you put on that mask, you stop being a public figure and you start being a member of a secret society. So, was Kubrick trying to warn us? Or was he just showing us the inevitable? Either way, the Eyes Wide Shut legacy is the foundation of every dark rumor you've ever heard about Hollywood. It's the starting point for a journey that leads us from the glamorous masks of the present day back into the dusty, scandalous archives of the past. Because as we're about to see next, Hollywood didn't just start partying like this in the 90s. The actors of the Golden Age were already laying the groundwork decades ago. If you think the eyes wide shut vibes are a modern invention, you haven't been paying attention to history. To truly understand the dark side of Hollywood, we have to hop in a time machine and head back to the so-called Golden Age. We're talking about the 1940s and 50s, the era of black and white glamour, cigarette holders and wholesome family values. But behind that Technicolor curtain was a world so scandalous, it makes modern Instagram influencers look like choir boys. This was the era of the studio system, where movie stars weren't just employees, they were property. And because they were property, their private lives had to be scrubbed clean by a massive machine of fixers, private eyes, and a very specific guy named Scotty Bowers. Let's talk about Scotty. If there was a CEO of secret Hollywood sex, it was him. For decades, he was a ghost, a guy everyone knew but nobody talked about. It wasn't until 2012, when he was in his late 80s, that he finally dropped his memoir, Full Service, and basically set the history of Hollywood on fire. Scotty was a young Marine veteran who ended up working at a Getty gas station on Hollywood Boulevard in 1946. Now, on the surface, he was just pumping gas. But in reality, that gas station was the ultimate drive-through for desire. According to Scotty, a famous actor named Walter Pidgeon pulled up one day, gave him a $20 tip, and asked him to come along. That was the spark. Word spread through the Hollywood hills like wildfire. If you needed a secret encounter, a tryst, or a full-blown orgy that the studios couldn't find out about, you went to see Scotty at the pump. He eventually moved his operation to a back room at a bar called the Richfield Oil Station, where he acted as a sexual matchmaker for the biggest names in history. We're talking about A-listers like Cary Grant, Rock Hudson, and even the legendary Katharine Hepburn. This is where it gets complicated. Scotty's stories are what historians call cheerfully unverifiable. Most of the people he talked about were already dead by the time he wrote the book, so they couldn't exactly sue him for libel. Critics, like Hepburn's biographer James Curtis, say Scotty was just a gifted storyteller spinning yarns. But then you look at the documentary made about him, and you see these old retired Hollywood insiders nodding along. They knew. They remember the gas station. They remember the arrangement. Scotty claimed he arranged gay encounters for stars who were forced by their studios to live in lavender marriages to keep up their straight, leading man images. He even claimed he procured faux college girls for the famous sex researcher Alfred Kinsey. But Scotty wasn't the only one keeping tabs on the elite. Enter the fixers. In the 50s, the major studios, MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, had morality clauses in their contracts. If a star was caught in a deviant sexual situation or a secret party, their career was over in 24 hours. To prevent this, the studios employed guys like Fred Otash. Otash was a legendary private investigator and a former cop who basically functioned as the cleanup crew for the elite. Otash didn't just fix problems, he collected them. He had a specialized team that would bug hotel rooms and install hidden microphones in the mansions of the rich and famous. This wasn't just for gossip, it was for leverage. There are long-standing rumors that Otash had secret recordings of Marilyn Monroe and JFK, and while those specific tapes have never been made public, his files were a treasure trove of the underground. This proves that even back then, the secret party wasn't just about fun, it was about surveillance. It was about knowing who was in the room so you could control them later. The Golden Age was built on a foundation of NH. Never happened. If a star ended up in a hospital or a police station after a wild night, the fixer would arrive before the journalist. The records would vanish, and the public would keep believing the fantasy. Scotty Bowers and Fred Otash were the two sides of the same coin. One provided the pleasure, the other provided the protection. It was a closed loop of secrecy that lasted for decades. But as the studio system began to crumble in the late 60s, this underground world needed a new home. It needed a place that was private but public at the same time. A place where the masks could stay on but the cameras were always rolling. And that, my friends, leads us directly to a certain mansion with a very famous grotto. Because if Scotty Bowers was the king of the gas station, the next guy we're talking about was the king of the entire world. The Playboy Mansion. It's the ultimate symbol of the Hollywood high life. For decades, every young guy wanted to be there, and every aspiring starlet wanted to be invited to the Midsummer Night's Dream party. It was the peak of cool. But if you talk to the women who actually lived there, the ones who saw the sun come up over the grotto, a very different, much darker picture starts to emerge. This wasn't a party, it was a production, and Hugh Hefner was the director of a very twisted play. We have to look at the A&E series, Secrets of Playboy, because that's where the Playboy myth finally shattered. Holly Madison, who was the #1 girlfriend for years, has been incredibly vocal about what went on behind those closed doors. She describes her first night out with Hefner and the girls, and it sounds less like a wild party and more like a factory assembly line. She recalls walking into a darkened room where porn was blasting on giant screens. There was no romance, no connection. It was just a group of women surrounding Hefner as he went through the motions. Holly's exact words were that the experience was mechanical and robotic, but it gets worse. One of the most terrifying details she shared was about consent and safety. According to Holly, Hefner flat out refused to use protection during these group sex sessions. Think about the power dynamic there. You're a young woman in your early 20s. You've moved into this mansion. You've been isolated from your family, and now you're being pushed into a situation where your health is at risk because the man in charge wants to feel powerful. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about performance and control. If you think Holly's account is intense, the stories from Carissa and Christina Shannon, the twins who lived at the mansion later on, will genuinely turn your stomach. They described a post-orgy routine that sounds like something out of a horror movie. They said that after the act was finished, butlers would bring in basins of hot water and rags to clean Hefner off between partners. Carissa Shannon didn't mince words when she talked about this. She explicitly compared the entire environment and the way they were treated to rape. When you're being washed down like a piece of equipment in a cleaning ritual, after being used for a group performance, the glamour of the silk pajamas starts to look a lot like a uniform for a prisoner. And how did he keep them there? How did he keep the secret from leaking for 40 years? It was a combination of drugs and psychological warfare. Multiple whistleblowers have confirmed the use of quaaludes at the mansion. These weren't just recreational drugs for a good time. Hugh Hefner reportedly referred to them as thigh openers. Let that sink in for a second. That is the language of a predator, not a sexual revolutionary. By drugging the guests and the residents, he ensured that their memory of the events was fuzzy and their ability to resist was gone. On top of the drugs, there was the financial cage. The girls were given a weekly allowance, usually around $1,000, but it came with strings. If you broke a rule, if you weren't grateful enough, or if you dared to stay out past the 9 p.m. curfew, the money was gone. You were trapped in a gilded cage. You had the fame, you had the clothes, and you had the parties, but you had zero agency. You were part of a stable. The Playboy mansion served as a bridge. It took the secret backroom fixers of the 1950s and turned the secret sex party into a global brand. It made the world think that being part of an elite orgy was the ultimate goal of human existence. But as we've seen from the women who escaped, the reality was a nightmare of mechanical sex, dehumanizing rituals, and systematic abuse. It laid the groundwork for the modern, elite sex clubs we see today. The ones where the membership fees are higher, the masks are more expensive, and the NDAs are even more airtight. Because if Hefner proved one thing, it's that the rich will pay a lot of money to treat people like objects, as long as the brand looks good on the outside. Now it's time to look at how that brand evolved into the modern-day Sanctum. Let's dive in. Alright, so we've seen the gas stations and the mansion grotto. But where do the elite go now? In the age of iPhones and 24/7 paparazzi, the game had to change. It had to get more exclusive, more expensive, and a whole lot weirder. Enter the era of the modern elite sex club. We're moving away from the swinging 70s vibe of Playboy and into something that feels way more calculated, cold, and honestly, pretty much exactly like a scene from Eyes Wide Shut. The heavy hitter here is a club called Sanctum. We have talked a bit about it before. It was founded by a guy named Damon Lorna. And if you're looking for the direct link between Kubrick's film and real-world Hollywood, this is it. Lorna has literally gone on record saying that after he watched the movie, he realized there was a massive market of billionaires and A-listers who wanted that exact experience. He didn't just want to throw a party. He wanted to build a sanctuary for the super rich to explore their darkest fetishes without a single person ever finding out. But here's the thing. You can't just walk into Sanctum. This isn't your local nightclub. To even get a sniff of these events, which are usually held in massive multi-million-dollar mansions in Beverly Hills or the Hollywood Hills, you have to go through a vetting process that is more intense than a background check for the CIA. And let's talk about the price tag, because it is absolutely insane. We are talking about membership tiers that range from a few $1,000s all the way up to the Dominus level. How much does that cost? Try $75,000 for a lifetime membership. Let that sink in for a second. That is more than the average American's annual salary, just for the privilege of putting on a mask and walking into a room. The gender dynamics at these clubs are also a massive part of the story. While the men, The Dominus members are paying the price of a luxury car to be there. Women often get in for free, but only after a rigorous application process, where they have to submit photos and prove they fit the aesthetic. It creates this weird artificial environment where the power is completely lopsided. You have the tech moguls and the movie stars on one side with the money, and the curated participants, performers or guests on the other. Inside, the atmosphere is peak masquerade. The LA Times reported that the dress code is strictly black tie, tuxedos or high-end lingerie, with masks being the central requirement for anyone who wants to stay anonymous. And the entertainment? It's not just music, it's what insiders call human furniture. We are talking about live erotic performers who are literally used as objects, sometimes acting as human drink carts or footrests, or couples having sex in plain view while guests walk by with their champagne. It's a total deconstruction of the human being into a prop. And don't think for a second that this is just for anonymous business guys. The media has been buzzing for years about who actually attends these things. Reports from various outlets have spotted people like Gwyneth Paltrow, Steven Tyler, and Bill Maher at Sanctum parties. Even Hunter Biden reportedly claimed to have a membership. Now, to be clear, being spotted at a party doesn't mean you're a participant in everything that goes on, but it shows you just how deeply these clubs are woven into the fabric of the modern elite. It's the ultimate if you know circle. Sanctum's success wasn't a fluke. It started a global trend. Now you've got clubs like Kinky Rabbit in New York City or Boca Negra, all catering to that same 1% who crave the mixture of high-end luxury and underground fetish. These places have become the new boardrooms of Hollywood. Deals are made, scripts are pitched, and alliances are forged, all while someone in a Venetian mask is performing in the background. It's a world built on the idea that if you have enough money, you can buy a reality where the normal rules of morality and human decency don't exist. But here's the problem. When you build a world where everything is a commodity, even the people, things eventually start to go off the rails. You can't keep that much power and that much secrecy in a bottle forever without someone getting hurt. And that brings us to the next layer of the shadow, the NDA hush codes that enforce this dark cult of total silence. So we've talked about the masks, the mansions, and the $75,000 price tags. But how do these people actually get away with it? How does a massive star-studded orgy happen in the middle of Beverly Hills without the cops showing up or a TikTok leaking the next morning? The answer isn't just privacy. It's a sophisticated, high-stakes system of psychological and legal warfare. We are talking about the architecture of silence. This is where the party stops being a fun secret and starts looking a lot more like a criminal conspiracy. In Hollywood, the ultimate weapon isn't a gun. It's the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement. But in these circles, an NDA isn't just a piece of paper you sign for a job. It's a hush money trap designed to bury the truth forever. We've seen this play out in real time with the 2025 Sean Diddy Combs trial, which basically ripped the mask off the entire industry. Prosecutors didn't just talk about parties, they talked about freak-offs. These were marathon, multi-day orgies that Diddy allegedly orchestrated like a film director, controlling every light, every angle, and every participant. But here's the dark part. How do you keep someone from talking about a freak-off? You pay them, or you break them. During the trial, a stripper named Kerry Morgan testified that after a dispute, Combs paid her $30,000 just to sign a confidentiality deal and disappear. That's the gentleman's version of the NH never happened code we talked about before. If you take the money, you're legally bound to pretend the night was a hallucination. And if the money doesn't work, then comes the extortion. Cassie Ventura's mother gave some of the most heartbreaking testimony of the whole case. She told the court that Combs threatened to leak explicit sex tapes of Cassie unless her parents paid him $20,000. Think about that level of evil for a second. This is a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars, shaking down a family for 20 grand, just to prove he owned their daughter's reputation. This is why people don't speak up. The secret party isn't just a room you walk into. It's a cage you can't walk out of, because they've recorded everything you did while you were inside. But it gets even more terrifying. When Homeland Security agents raided Combs's properties, they didn't just find the infamous 1,000 bottles of baby oil and the luxury lingerie. They found AR-15 rifle parts with the serial numbers scratched off. They found thousands of rounds of ammunition stored just feet away from the fetish gear. Prosecutors argued these weapons weren't for home defense. They were there to coerce women into compliance during the freak-offs. It's the ultimate power move. You can leave, but look what's sitting on the nightstand. This culture of silence actually stretches into something even more organized. The secrecy cult. Take the Nixium case. On the surface, it was a self-help group for the elite, but inside, there was a secret sisterhood called DOS. High-profile actresses like Alison Mack, who you might know from Smallville, admitted to recruiting women into this inner circle. These women weren't just party guests. They were forced to sign oaths of silence and provide collateral, which was usually naked photos or damaging secrets, so they could never leave. Then came the branding. These women were literally held down and branded with a cauterizing iron with the initials of the cult leader Keith Raniere. They were turned into sex slaves under the guise of elite access. This is the logical, dark conclusion of the eyes wide shut fantasy. It starts with a mask and a fancy drink, and it ends with a brand on your hip and a federal agent at your door. This architecture of silence is the ultimate psychological trap. The industry uses these hush codes and NH phrases to make victims feel like they are the ones who are crazy or breaking the rules, just by having a memory. It's a massive gaslighting machine fueled by billions of dollars and the best lawyers money can buy. But here's the thing, the NDAs and the legal threats are just the first layer of the cage. For the people at the very top, a signature on a piece of paper isn't enough to guarantee loyalty. They need something deeper. They need to bind you to them in a way that law and money can't reach. They move past the legal and into the spiritual, using ancient symbols and psychological triggers to turn a party into a ceremony. If you think a courtroom is scary, wait until you see what happens when the lights go red and the legal talk is replaced by something much older and much more sinister. Because as we're about to see next, the elite aren't just looking for a good time, they're looking for a ritual. Forget the courtrooms. Forget the boring legal filings. If you want to know why Hollywood is actually obsessed with these secret parties, you have to look past the sex and the drugs. We're entering the territory of high-level ritualism. We're talking about the spirit cooking vibes, the occult symbolism, and the theory that these parties aren't just for fun, they're for power. This is where the rabbit hole gets so deep that you might actually want to turn the lights back on. For years, people have pointed out the weird, ritualistic nature of Hollywood's biggest nights. Have you ever looked closely at the Met Gala themes? Or the stage designs at the Grammys? There is a very specific type of imagery that keeps showing up. The all-seeing eye, the Baphomet horns, and the heavy use of occult sacrifice aesthetics. But it's not just on TV. Insiders claim that the real parties, the ones held in the basement levels of Bel Air mansions, take these symbols and turn them into reality. Take the infamous Rothschild Surrealist Ball from 1972. The photos from that night are legendary. Guests wearing giant stag heads, bird cages over their faces, and plates served on mannequin bodies. People say that was the blueprint. Modern whistleblowers who are too scared to use their real names have described red room parties where the theme isn't just masks, it's transcendence. They claim the elite believe that by participating in these extreme ritualized acts, they are tapping into an ancient energy that keeps them at the top of the food chain. It sounds like a movie plot, right? But then you see a massive celebrity like Kanye West or Azealia Banks go on a public rant about the industry being a literal cult, and you start to wonder. And then there's the coded language of the red carpet. Have you ever noticed how many celebrities seem to have a breakdown right after they get invited into the inner circle? People call it MK Ultra, or Monroe programming. The theory is that these secret parties are used to break upcoming stars. They are put into high-stress, highly compromising situations, often filmed so that the handlers have total control over them. It's not just about an NDA, it's about soul-crushing leverage. If you have video of a straight A-list hero doing something ritualistic or deviant, you don't just own their career, you own their mind. But here is the scariest part, the vanishing people. Every few years, someone from the inner circle tries to go rogue. They start posting weird stuff on Instagram Live, they talk about the darkness, and then they just disappear. Not killed, but silenced. They go to a wellness facility for a month and come back looking like a shell of their former selves, suddenly reading from a script and apologizing for their mental health episode. The theory is that these wellness centers are actually reprogramming facilities where the secrets of the parties are scrubbed from their brains. We also have to talk about the blood ritual rumors. I know, it sounds insane, but look at the trend of vampire facials, or celebrities like Megan Fox and MGK openly admitting they drink each other's blood. They say it's just for art, but in the underground world, blood has always been the ultimate currency. There are persistent, terrifying rumors that the truly elite parties involve the consumption of adrenochrome, a chemical supposedly harvested from people in states of extreme fear. Science says it's just oxidized adrenaline, but the myth of it has become the holy grail of the Hollywood underground. So, is it just edgy celebrities playing with dark aesthetics to look cool? Or is there a literal ritualistic cult operating in the shadows of the Hollywood Hills, using these parties to bind the world's most powerful people together through shared trauma and blood oaths? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But one thing is for sure, the masks aren't just for show. They are there because, in that world, the person you see on the screen doesn't exist. There is only the ritual, the power, and the NH code that keeps the nightmare from leaking into the light. Hollywood isn't just a dream factory. It's a place where the elite go to play God, and the cost of admission is your soul.